But he did. Because the other 6 they didn't want. So,
Oh, okay. Okay. So these aren't tickets. Okay.
yeah, that's about all I know on that.
I'm glad I didn't think about that beforehand.
I think we're about ready. You guys ready?
Oh, did you
Ready?
get it working? Okay.
Ready. Ready. Ready.
Kurt, ready?
He's ready.
Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome to the meeting of the Lawrence City Commission. We'll start this evening with a presentation of a citizen donation and the Lawrence Community Housing Trust of a monetary donation to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Do we have a speaker?
Good evening. My name is Steve Ozark. I want to thank you for this opportunity. And I want to thank the voters for voting for the referendum for the sales tax reallocation that allowed us to get somewhere around $1 million a year starting in April of 2019. I go to the Affordable Housing Advisory Board meetings every opportunity when I'm in town for two years and 8 months, and I want to thank that body and the city staff, and I want to thank you commissioners for your support to get us here. It is kind of miraculous what's happened in Lawrence, and it's been noted on a national front. The Center for Community Change, which is a national organization, has an article. I know you can see it on the Vote Yes for Affordable Housing Facebook, but they talk about what we achieved here in Lawrence as something that's truly moved ahead of its timeline and is visionary for our people who suffer to pay too much for their cost of living. The donation for the basketball tickets, I love KU basketball, but I love this more. I give away tickets to whatever home game somebody wants, and we only raised $300 this year, so it's kind of a bargain. I don't know if it's because our team's off. I think part of it is the fact that with this funding, people kind of assume the affordable housing issue has been solved, and those of us in the know it's going to take a lot more than that. The voters took a gamble from talking to many of them to get the initiative. They feel concerned about how this money will be used. The great thing is with the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, that's a very public body where that information is then shared with commissioners here in this filmed capacity. And I hope that Midco will consider filming the AHAB meetings because they're getting interesting now that we have some $10 million coming up. We want the public input and the public trust to be honored here with this particular money. There's other pots of money can be used for development and other areas. We're seeking, we hope, to do the 0 to 30% median income, the 0 to 60% median income, the people who suffer the most, where without what we're doing with affordable housing, they simply will not be able to survive. I hope more people donate to the trust fund. Our initial $100,000 pilot project that we did built 3 permanently affordable homes with $100,000 leverage, and those homes now exist in perpetuity. And the permanent affordable housing stock is the key to this in my mind. I'm hoping that we can find a creative way where people can put their houses into this trust, in a land trust, forgiveness maybe of property taxes, maybe some kind of incentive. I just told my kids, if mom kicks off before me, house is going into the land trust. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and let's keep working together.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Steve.
Nice.
Next, we have the consent agenda. All matters listed below on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on those items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Members of the public wishing to speak to an item that's been pulled off of the consent agenda will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. Are there any items on the consent agenda that a commissioner would like to remove?
No. Nope.
Are there any items a member of the public would like to remove? Okay. In addition to the items on the consent agenda, we have claims in the total amount of $3,064,294.48 with a vendor count of 191.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Commissioner Soden, second from Commissioner Ananda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. Now it's time for public comment. The public is allowed to speak to any items or issues except those scheduled on the consent agenda or regular agenda portions of the agenda, after first being recognized by the mayor. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes for public comment. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Rather, they will refer the items to staff for follow-up if necessary. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, and state their name and address. Speakers should address all comments and questions to the commission. Do we have public comment this evening?
Mayor, Commissioners. I'm Richard Haig. I'm the chairman of the Airport Advisory Board, but this is something away from the board tonight. We've been working with emergency management years ago to develop a plan for response at the airport and get procedures in place should there be a catastrophic event. The original exercise was a tabletop exercise back in March of '26, and there were about 20 agencies involved with the planning of this event. So basically, it put procedures in place to get the ball rolling in case of an aircraft accident, especially involving a larger aircraft. And since the airport, we're seeing a lot more 15, 20, 25 passenger aircraft out there. It's something that's good to have these procedures in place. So working with Terry Smith, they got a grant under a hazmat grant to do the first exercise. They've gotten another grant also now to do an actual full-scale exercise. So we'll get the different agencies to respond as if it was an actual emergency at the airport. This agency, it includes University of Kansas, Leavenworth County, Douglas County, Highway Patrol, all the agencies that could be involved with it. The university was engaged because a lot of the aircraft that are bringing people into the airport are bringing sports teams and things like that, so the university would be involved with that. And so this scale, I've provided you guys, the commission, with a schedule of the planning meetings, and the actual event is scheduled for June 27th. Since this is taking place on city property, I figured it was important to have the city commission's input and the city commission be aware of what's going on and kind of coordinate things. So we'd like to work with staff to get this put together and make sure it happens in a good way. So this is just to bring this to your attention for review later on.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Any questions for Richard? I guess we can do that, do we? We'll send this on to staff.
Okay, thank you.
Other public comment? Okay, we'll move on to commission items. First item we have is a discussion of commissioner, board, and committee assignments. We have a list, and at the top of the list, it says, in some cases, commissioner services by virtue of the office held. In other cases, it's by separate appointment or direction of the commission. Do we have information on which of these assignments are by virtue of office held?
I don't know that there's any that are remaining on this list that are that way.
Okay.
Mayor, that heading used to apply when we had the Public Incentive Review Committee, for example. So that
Okay.
was the mayor and vice mayor that served in that capacity, but
Okay.
that was recently changed. So I think these would just be simply by the
So we
desire
need
of the
to share
commission.
these and decide
Yes.
at the direction of the commission.
And you can note there at the end of the description on each one, it'll indicate who the commission has appointed last. And
Okay.
so there's several of them that would need to be,
So we need to replace Commissioner Amix on the Horizon 2020 Steering Committee
And Peasy.
and on Peasley. Okay. EDC, you've been on there. Lisa Larson's been on BTBC. I've been on DMI. We just put Lisa on the Explore Lawrence board recently. Then we've got the MPO board. Matthew and Lisa have been on that. Matthew, you've been on that for a couple years, right?
I'm on year 3.
Okay. And then the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, so
Yeah,
Leslie's been on
Jennifer
that.
has been interested in replacing me on that.
Okay,
I was thinking she already had.
okay. So we'll just start with Jennifer going to the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council? Okay. I have been going to the EDC for a bit, so I think that's probably a good
Well,
one
the
for that.
EDC isn't the same as ED Partners.
Right.
It's a
Do you-
different
do you-
one.
You're on EDC?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to keep on doing that?
EDC, yeah.
Okay.
I think the ED Partners is meant for mayor and vice mayor. Yeah, but that's not a formal,
Oh, okay, so that's ED Partners.
Committee.
Is that what I've been doing then? I guess I
Yeah.
ought to know what I've been doing.
that's, I assume that's what he's talking about.
Yes,
Okay. Okay. So that's not actually on this list because it's not a, should it be on the list?
I guess, Mayor, that would be one that, that traditionally has been the mayor and vice mayor that has served on that. It's not a formal committee, though that's
Oh, it's
probably the
not.
reason why it's not on
Okay.
there.
Yeah, it's just commissioners and staff and chambers.
Okay. So
But you're
you're,
welcome to continue going to that, of course.
okay, that's the ED Partners.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got Jennifer on Criminal Justice and Leslie on EDC of Lawrence. Okay.
I'm on Explore Lawrence.
And Lisa's on Explore Lawrence.
I would be interested in Horizon 2020 in Peasley.
Both of them?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of time.
I realize that. I'm aware.
Let's do them one at a time.
Okay.
Which one of you?
Horizon 2020, that's the
Okay.
first one.
Okay.
I don't know if it matters or not, but do we need to update that committee description? Because the committee description that we have publicly advertised here talks about it completing its work by April 1st, 2015.
That might not
That's right.
happen, huh?
Which
That may have been aspirational at some point.
our late fees are out the roof at this point.
Good point, Matthew, good point.
Oh,
Okay, so people okay with Lisa being on Horizon 2020? Is that,
okay.
okay. Let's talk about Peasley. Are there other folks who are interested in Peasley too?
If you want it, it's yours.
Okay.
Okay. Appreciate you taking the load there. It's a lot of meetings. BTBC,
Are you wanting to stay on that?
Lisa's on that.
I'm on that now. I mean, if nobody else wants to be on it, I would.
Does anybody else
stay.
want to do BTBC?
I'd take it if you wanted to lose it, but if
That's fine.
you're wanting to stick with it, you can.
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we got Matthew for BTBC. I'm on DMI. I'm okay hanging in on that one. And then MPO. Matthew, have you done enough there? You want to let that one go?
I feel like my impact has really been felt there. Yeah. I don't mind sticking around. I mean,
Okay,
it's
well,
fine.
I mean, we need two.
I would like to go off of it.
Okay. Anybody want to go on?
Mayor,
Yeah,
if I can interject.
sure.
The MPO in March is scheduled to end the culmination of a couple-of-year planning effort for the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is the major
Okay.
transportation plan. So if you could consider that swapping commissioners maybe at
Then-
the April meeting or after that effort is complete. then
Okay, so we'll,
we appreciate it for
we'll leave that
consistency's
one.
sake.
Thank you, Scott, I appreciate that. Can you juggle all these things?
yeah.
Okay, and you're going to
Just two
stay
more
on there?
meetings.
That's fine.
Okay, you're interested in continuing on? I mean, that'd be great if you were.
That's, yeah,
Appreciate it.
unless
Yeah.
you want it.
Well, I mean, there might be an opening in
It
April.
sounds like April might be an
Yeah.
opportunity to, do we know what day that committee?
It's always
meeting is?
Thursday, it's Thursday at 3 o'clock, let's see, what?
Third Thursday? Is it
It's,
the
well, it's
third?
this, whatever this Thursday is, at 3
So it's the
o'clock.
second Thursday.
So second Thursday.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
I think it is the third
Okay.
Thursday.
That
at
sounds
3.
right.
At 3
The
o'clock.
meetings
Consider
are,
that.
they're usually very short. I
Yeah.
can't remember many of them going longer than an hour.
I would be happy to.
Mm-hmm.
take
Okay,
that
so
in
we'll
April.
do that after Scott has gotten the continuity that he's interested in.
Sure.
And I think that's a good point. Okay, so I guess I'll just go ahead and move that we do the assignments as discussed. Do we need to specify any more clearly than we've already done?
I've got it down.
Okay, so that's a motion.
I would second that.
Okay, we have a motion, Boley, second Herbert. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Commission items, other commission items. Anybody? I've got enough for everybody.
Yeah, you got one, don't you?
Okay. I'm going to pass out some handouts here. I think Kurt can throw some of this stuff up on the overhead. What I'm handing out is the January financial report for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the Housing Trust Fund budget item. And I'm just interested in clarification about the monthly financial report and specifically the budgeted column, because it seems to be different than what we had in this.
Are you thinking it's supposed to be 600,000?
No. I think the funding source is different. That's another one that's coming up.
Oh,
Where'd you say they were from?
So on Chrome, they should be the top.
Oh.
The Chrome browser, the top on your left.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm catching up with you.
Sure.
The question, Mayor?
Just clarification of the source and the budget line, budget column.
You're referring to the report that was presented at
The Affordable Housing Trust Fund advisory board meeting yesterday.
Okay, so this is that report. And I think you're referring to this 300,000 in this budgeted 2018 column.
Right, exactly.
So there is a error in this number. This number is correct, but it should have been listed in the debt proceeds line item. And that is what is currently approved in the 2018 budget.
Okay.
However, as you know, there is a budget hearing that you'll be having at your meeting next week to talk about this fund and the
Right.
particular issue that relates to this being a debt service item, which we know
Right.
it can't be. So it will
Yeah.
eventually need to be moved into transfer.
Right.
But
But that would be when we amended the budget.
correct,
Okay.
yes.
Just want to make sure that I was clear on what the situation was there.
Correct.
so it will be a transfer.
We will have to transfer money, but the budget was with debt funding.
Correct.
Okay.
Originally, yeah.
I appreciate that clarification. Does anybody have any questions for Diane on that one? Okay. My next commission item is to talk about the summer food service program. I handed out some numbers on that. We have 2015, 2016, and 2017 numbers for the summer food service program. I got this at a meeting of the folks who are planning the 2018 summer meals program.
Did you want me to show this to you? Mayor?
Yeah, if you'd
Okay.
throw that up there, that'd be great. And the takeaway on this is that the total number of meals that the kids received decreased dramatically from 2015 to 2016 and 2016 to 2017. It's down almost, what, 10,000 meals?
Yeah,
Okay?
9,000.
So that's kind of the background for what's going on with this program. But if you look at the Parks and Recs summer program, our numbers had a dip from 2015 to 2016, and then they came back very strongly in 2017. So we had a good, healthy increase in the number of meals that were provided through our Parks and Rec sites. And I just want to say thank you so much to the Parks and Rec people who worked on this. I know that Dwayne Peterson is working on that now, this year. And, I had a brief conversation with Elizabeth Kiever about this. There might be a time when having the reduction of meals served would be a good thing because people didn't need the food. In this case, Elizabeth says, we have not had this significant a reduction in food insecurity in Lawrence. It's just the way the program has worked over the last couple of years. We're not getting those meals to the kids the way we should. So with that background, again, I want to say thank you so much to the people at Parks and Rec for the efforts they've made to make sure that our kids are getting the meals that they need. And there are going to be ongoing meetings of this summer meals planning for 2018. And that's kind of a segue to my next topic, which is we've had a proposal in Topeka to lower the sales tax on food at the state level. And that proposal, as it's been put forward, wouldn't actually affect the city. But we have to keep in mind that we receive about $5 million a year, I think it is. Maybe you can help me out with that. I think the city gets about $5 million a year in sales tax on groceries. And, I've been working to figure out how much people in Lawrence who are in poverty pay to the city, to us, in sales tax on the groceries, with the idea we might be able to turn some of that money back around to mitigate hunger in Lawrence. So I'm bringing it up now to see if there's support on the commission for continuing to investigate that as we get ready for the budget season. So,
Yeah, I support it. That's, had the opportunity to kind of sit in on a little bit of that. And I think we're coming up with some really good data in how we calculate it, we need.
but, again, before we get too much further along with it, I just wanted to sound people out. The idea, again, is to figure out how much of the 1.62 city share of the sales tax we get from people who are in poverty, so we can turn around. I think it was the second President Bush who said to help people who are trying to put food on their family. Just, again, I just wanted to sound it out and see if there's support for that.
So can I clarify to make sure I understand correctly?
Yeah.
What you're kind of proposing is looking at the income or the sales tax that we receive on food dollars and the percentage of those dollars that are spent by individuals experiencing poverty and apply that back into providing food security measures.
Right.
Okay,
Through programming or
Yeah.
something else,
yeah.
It's at the state level, if they cut the sales tax on food, they have other revenue possibilities like income tax that they could raise. At the city, I'm not sure that we have a similar revenue source that would make up for that $5 million. So I'm concerned about that, but I also, at the same time, am concerned about hunger in Lawrence. So trying to figure out a way to kind of navigate these different political currents and actually some of the dire straits that some of our folks are in, try to figure out a way to make things work a little better.
So to clarify, can I ask a question around the language of the proposal statewise that's being made? Is it allowing cities to have the option also of reducing sales tax on food?
I honestly don't know. What I understand it to be is that they're talking about cutting the rate of the sales tax on groceries from 6.5 or whatever it is to 2.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be to take the tax off, it would simply be to lower the rate.
Mhm. Okay. And
Yep.
cities would, and I'm sorry if I'm digging too deeply into this, I guess that I would have a
Yeah.
different opinion about it if cities were also granted the option of reducing the sales tax that they have on food as well. Does that make sense?
I believe we have that option, don't we?
I'm not sure
I
that
thought
we do.
We talked about that in years past.
I don't think we have the
We don't?
I don't think
opportunity
we do
to,
either.
to,
We don't?
well, again, I don't know. But, I mean, this kind of conversation, I think, would be useful as the conversation about taking sales tax off of groceries for everybody, might affect our city. So,
Tony, do you have any thoughts on that?
My understanding is that the cities do not have the authority to add exemptions, sales tax
Right.
exemptions, that can only be done at the state level. I can review the pending legislation and talk with some colleagues and see if that is being discussed as as a possibility, but I don't think that's likely.
Okay.
okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
So are you suggesting a substitute revenue?
No, I'm not suggesting substitute. I'm not sure that we can. And it's possible that we wouldn't be able to completely match the number that we identify. I mean, we might simply not have the money to do that. But it's kind of a, I'm trying to think of the word, kind of a hopeful suggestion, aspirational. Because I'm frankly concerned that the conversation is going to be, oh, we should take the sales tax off of food because it's the right thing to do. But I can actually afford to pay sales tax on groceries, and there's no revenue source that would be that would be a substitute for this. And at $5 million for the city, I think people need to know that's a big deal.
So if you acknowledge that there probably isn't a substitute revenue,
Right.
the logical extension is that it will have to come from a cut in expense from something else,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Do you have any ideas about what you'd like to cut?
Not offhand, but budget season's up, right?
Be good to hear your thoughts on what you think should
Yeah.
be cut.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Okay. And I guess I've got one more commission item. Seem to have them all at once. Part of our welcome to the new commissioner is to introduce pending issues. And the issue of massage therapy regulation and combating human trafficking is a lingering issue for us. And I'm hoping that you'll be able to help us with it. And I'm interested in your ideas about how to move forward before we meet with the county to talk about this, because we were interested in making sure we had similar regulation so that we wouldn't just be chasing things out into the unincorporated areas of the county. We also had a very significant response from the massage therapy community here in town, so just wanted to bring this up and kind of get your thoughts about how we can do constructive conversations and work in advance of this meeting with the county.
Thank you. And that is an issue in which I've worked peripherally, having worked in sexual and domestic violence. So the human trafficking issue is something that I've had conversations about. And I am meeting with an individual representing, I don't know if they're representing a group of massage therapists, but who wants to have a conversation about the proposed regulations. And I haven't had an opportunity to review what was originally proposed, and I would like to do that. But I do think that I would be more than happy. I mean, it speaks to the heart of the community organizing work that I've done, and really working with professional organizations and particularly individuals whose livelihood will be impacted by a problem that isn't theirs, but it affects what they do and certainly the reputation of the massage therapy industry overall. So I think that would be a wonderful conversation to take part in, and however I can be part of that, I'm happy to do so.
Well, I mean, I think, most of the conversation will probably be taking place at the staff level, but there may be a place for you to be also involved. So I'm just kind of throw that your way. And, we hope to be able to take some kind of proposed solutions as well as the problem to the county when we have that meeting, so. Okay. Okay. I did enough for everybody, okay. Last chance for commission items. Okay. We don't have a city manager report. We have a meeting list.
I don't have any meetings.
Looks like we're there. Okay.
I'd make a motion that we adjourn the regular city commission meeting to move into the work session.
We have a motion, Herbert. Second, Soden. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Thank you. So now we embark on the work session. The work session provides an opportunity for the city commission to discuss items in greater detail. As a general practice, the commission will not make decisions on items presented during this time. Rather, they will refer the items to staff for follow-up if necessary. Public comment related to the work session topics will be allowed at the end of the discussion on each item. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes for public comment. First item is presentation from Lawrence Memorial Hospital. Good evening.
Good evening. Is it down at the bottom?
No,
Okay.
actually, it's on the, it's actually, help?
Try and go down to the bottom.
He put it on the,
Yeah,
there we go.
there we go.
I did. Thank you.
Good. Good evening, I'm Russ. Do we just?
Go ahead, yeah.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, I'm Russ Johnson. I'm the CEO for Lawrence Memorial Hospital, and I appreciate you all making a little time for us to tell you about our the hospital's developments. We're going to focus principally on some work out west that we're doing, but we're going to talk also a little bit more generally of the context of the hospital. Last late summer, I guess, appeared before the council talking,
Can I get you to speak closer to the microphone,
Yes,
please?
certainly.
And you can raise the podium, too, with an arrow there on the, your...
It's on the left, or the right.
Super
that's
super
pretty
snazzy.
It's very nice.
We got a kick out
We're
of
not
one
used to this.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
This doesn't count as my presentation time, does it?
No, you're fine.
Taking away.
No, just kidding. Last summer, we appeared before you with a request on parking around our campus. And we had a discussion at that time about the growth of Lawrence Memorial Hospital and what's happened over the last 20 years in healthcare, which is a swing really from inpatient to outpatient services. And as that's happened, you know, the way facilities and services are configured have changed along with it. And our campus, which continues to be our main site of service, is a great campus for a lot of things, but as we're seeing, it's kind of problematic when it comes to routine and outpatient services and parking and access and convenience. So a year and a half ago, our leadership team embarked on a strategic planning process thinking about what is, you know, the next 15 years, 20 years for our hospital, and really acknowledging that 80%, almost 80% of our business, our revenue, comes from outpatient services now. And hundreds of thousands of visits So even though we're a very busy inpatient facility, 80% of our volume is outpatient. And that's a changing field, and it's a changing competitive arena, and it's a changing area for consumer expectations. So out of that planning conversation, one of the things that emerged is that we need to be more effective, more convenient, and better access for outpatient services. And frankly, we need to look at how we can expand beyond our campus, because adding more services in that chassis is just going to be congested and less convenient for patients. So you can see on our little PowerPoint there, I'm going to shift now to our project out west, which you've seen in the paper. And Karen, who is my Chief Operating Officer and really has been the leader of this project, is going to step you through that. But our goals of that are really first and foremost creating access convenience for outpatient. You know, outpatient is the platform where competition in healthcare is primarily going. And we're pretty sure that if we sit dormant in this community, other competitors will come in from the outside and pick off services which undermine the underlying financial infrastructure about how a hospital works. You know, that's how you provide charitable services and emergency services and OB and community outreach and all those things that you lose money on, you make up for in the outpatient arena. So we think we need to be very proactive about those services. Concurrently to that conversation, as you know, Ortho Kansas became a wholly integrated part of Lawrence Memorial Hospital on January 1st. And part of that conversation with them was a vision for the future where, you know, we are not just going to maintain an orthopedic practice, but we really believe there's a long-term place for the Lawrence community to support a regional orthopedic practice. And to do that, we need fundamentally different facilities. And third, kind of related to that, we are partners with a number of physicians in the Lawrence Surgery Center, and this provides an opportunity for us to grow and expand those services. So at the very fundamental basis, there's a lot of other things, but that's kind of our reasoning behind that. And then I think Karen is going to take you through a little bit more of a peek at this facility and where it's at and kind of what our steps are now.
Sure. Thank you for having us today. It's been really nice to show this to our city too. What you have here, and I'm sorry it's not a little bit bigger, but this is really the plat that we're working with. And to get you oriented, and you'll have to excuse my directions if I get confused here, but the north is Rock Chalk Drive on the north. That is K10 on the west. That is George Williams Boulevard on the right access, and 6th Street on the bottom there. So that road shows where we're going to access off of 6th Street. It will come around and it will hook into that current frontage road right now. That's been probably the biggest problem we've had so far is working that out. Scott's been great to work with. Thank you very much for that. But that's the way it's going to look. We're going to show you right here what that's going to look like as we get a building on it. So as you see, the building actually fronts onto K10. So as you're driving south on K10, you're going to see, you can't see my finger, that doesn't really do any good.
I know.
I keep wanting to point at the screen. So it's going to front onto K10. The way that land is situated, it's going to be ground level on the front and on the back. So I'm going to show you a little bit more here. You'll see up in the right corner there, it says future MOB. We believe the land is, there's 20 acres there. That if we in the future need a medical office building, there's enough land there and enough room for parking that we can accommodate all those things. So that's the way it's laid out. What you see here is a result, and you probably can't see this, but I'll walk you through it, of our preliminary planning. We've been meeting with a lot of groups internally, trying to figure out what we need, what size we need, looking at what do we need in 5 years and 10 years. So the picture on the left is the first level of the building. You can see the entry there on the left. Family practice and internal medicine, our Mount-oriented practice will move out there. We will have some internal medicine physicians from our internal medicine group there in that area, in that green area. To the right of that, support services. Those are building support services, all the things you need to make your offices and things work. In the middle, it's like a connector building. You'll see that. It says registration there in that kind of teal. And the yellow behind it is where the pharmacy will be and also a draw station for lab. That pharmacy, we will partner with a local retail pharmacist, which has not been chosen yet. In that kind of light orange, that is, will be our Orthopedic Center of Excellence, where Orthopedic Kansas will move. And to the top of that is our the therapy area. Therapy would be PT and OT. We probably won't have speech out there, but that's a fairly large area. It's being developed to service primarily any kind of therapy you need, but specifically sports rehab, people that have had athletic injuries or whatever that need a bigger space to rehab. What you can't see outside of that, we'll have a therapy garden that will be right adjacent to our physical therapy area. So if people want to go outside, walk with a therapist, they can do that. In the middle of the picture, level 2, that's the ambulatory surgery center in blue. Right now there are 4 operating rooms in the one at 6th and Main. This one currently has 6 with 2 shelled out. One of the things that's really driving healthcare is a move to outpatient services. That means that surgeries are going to outpatient venues that used to only be done within the hospital, for example, total joints. So this is built to accommodate that shift to the future. It's going to have a few beds in there for patients if they need to stay overnight. Hopefully everybody gets to go home, but sometimes people just aren't ready to go home. And so they'll be able to accommodate 24-hour or longer stays if they need to. Up from there, the white area, that's food. Anytime you've got that many people around, people like to eat and people need their food. So we intend on, we'll extend our hospital-based chef-driven service there for dining. We'll have coffee there in that area. Also, there's a large conference room in that area that will be accessible to the public and a smaller conference area. Moving up from there in green, a full imaging center. Right now we have imaging at LMH South. What we have there will be greatly expanded and moved here. There'll be 2 MRIs, a CT, ultrasound, and just about anything you need there. Up from that, the breast center. We have a breast center at South. This is greatly expanded also. We have moved to Tomo, which is 3D breast. We're finishing the installation of that right now, actually, on our campus. This will be a state-of-the-art breast center. Dr. Don Jones, who's our breast surgeon, is office there. The continuum of care there for women that need, breast advice, whether it's screening or transition into surgery or oncology, is seamless there because she will office there. Dr. Keller will be in that area, that light blue area, that plastics. And on the corner there, we see specialty clinics. We will have probably some of our, whether it's OB or whether cardiology or maybe even visiting specialists from out of town can lease space in that area. That white space behind is shell space growth area. So if you move to the far right, that is right now planned all shell, except for the middle where it says a rooftop patio. We intend to have an area up there with some green space, be able to shine light down into the 2nd floor where we can have events, and the community can also have events.
Karen, while Karen says that's shell, and it currently is, we probably have 15 or 20,000 square feet of early interest in this campus. And I'll be kind of surprised if we have much more than 8,000 or 10,000 square feet of shell left by the time we're occupancy.
We have not started those meetings. We will very soon as we kind of get the details worked out, because as Russ said, we've got a lot of people that are really interested in being here. Not just because it's in the West and there's a lot of population there, but there's just so many accessible services that will make, I think, being in that building nice. So this is how that building might look from K10, although that's not the way the building is actually going to look, but that's how you will see it as you drive south on K10. This is a real cool thing, and I'm hoping it's going to work here. This is yes, it is. This is like
going to be all white, though.
This is just to show how the building will look and be situated on that piece of land. So you're coming around as it faces K10. This is the front. It's not going to look like that. It's going to have some different kind of stones there, but it's flying year round. So that's the view from the south. And it's bringing you around to the east. On that east, which I think I scooted by, we are discussing an urgent care. There is no urgent care on that side of town. If we do put that urgent care in, it will be accessible from this direction, from that parking lot.
Karen mentioned that the 2nd floor would be walkout level on the 2nd floor, so like post-operative ambulatory surgery patients would not have to go up and down, they could come directly out on the second floor.
They will
ground
exit
level.
through the back for privacy. We've been really talking about what patients need when they walk in. They don't really want anybody looking at them as they've walked out and had surgery. So we're kind of thinking about access for those patients.
You
I
can
have
see
a
that little
question.
sidewalk, we're gonna tie the, oh, sorry.
The urgent care, is that just another way of saying the ER?
No.
No.
Oh, okay.
Urgent care is a whole different, it's a lower level of care than an emergency department. They're not going to be taking care of people with heart attacks or strokes or things like that. Urgent cares are for people that, they've got a cough, they've got a chest cold, they may have a broken arm. You can handle those things. They can evaluate those things. We're considering an urgent care there, possibly with an orthopedic fast track. In other words, an orthopedic specialty, because of our accessibility right there to Rock Chalk and all the activities there. It seems like it might be a good idea to be able to take care of people who overextend themselves over there. But that's what we're discussing. Not sure.
Commissioner, can I add on to that? Because I think that's an important question. I came from Denver prior to here and in Kansas City. You're seeing a lot of development of freestanding emergency rooms. And we've purposefully thought about that, but emergency rooms are super expensive. They're very expensive for consumers, and we really don't think that's necessary long-term, and urgent care can probably take care of 40% of a typical emergency room visit at a much, much lower cost. So we want to test it out and see what level of service is really needed and what kind of access is really needed before we jump that far to emergency services.
One of the things we're doing that's not reflected here, at the same time we're doing all this work, we're doing a master facility planning, which we haven't done for many, many years, really looking at what we have with the growth that we anticipate in the next 5 to 10 years. And that's whether it's a surgical practice or whether it's in our pain center or our GI center. Are we situated for the growth of our community? So we're looking at where those things need to be on campus. We would really like to get those services that are on our campus that are purely outpatient off, because we have a parking issue there, as anybody knows it's been on our campus. We would like to get those people out so they can get in and get out easier and not have to deal with a big hospital. So what you have here are 2 slides that just going to run down through. These are the things that we are planning right now to put in the building. So you see the enlarged surgery center, and I said we go from 4 to at least 6 rooms. And when surgery centers talk about their size, we do it by how many operating rooms they have. So Ortho Kansas, Orthopedic Center of Excellence, our breast center, imaging center, those usually go together because of the just the specialties you need. We would have radiologists also reading at that center and also accessible to the breast center. Therapy, we have physical therapy in many, many locations. As I said, we will do physical therapy and occupational therapy here, but we'll focus on the sports rehab issues. Mount Orion, which is family practice, internal medicine group, which will not be their entire practice, it will just be a couple of docs. We have been trying to recruit internal medicine docs, that's always a challenge. Plastic surgery with Dr. Keller. Specialty clinics, that would be visiting specialists, possibly from out of the community if it's something we don't feel like we need 24/7. Retail pharmacy, we're looking at durable medical equipment. That will probably be a partnership with a community partner also. DME that's like wheelchairs and things like that. Lab, we will have a draw station out there, also service the physician practices within the building, but this will be able to keep patients who need to have lab from having to come onto the hospital campus too, because there's only one draw area within our hospital at this time. Urgent care, like I said, we're still thinking about that. The conference rooms, food court, and coffee, of course, and a roof garden. So I'm going to turn it over to
Yeah, so,
Chris.
we are doing a lot of talking and a lot of thinking about this campus, and it's a significant capital investment for us in the neighborhood of $95 million. And so certainly we're doing a lot of planning, and you can tell from Karen's remarks that there's a lot of thought going into this. But I want to be super clear that this is not a signal that the Main Street campus is somehow diminishing. In fact, kind of the opposite. We recently acquired the building at 6th and Main, where the current Lawrence Surgery Center is, and Ortho Kansas, and a number of other practices, because we have 205,000 square feet of medical office space on our campus, and we have 2,500 square feet left. And we have, starting in August 1st, we have a second spine surgeon, another orthopedist, an oncologist, an endocrinologist, an internal medicine doctor. So we don't have the space for them. And we don't really see bricks and mortar on that campus, but we do see the 6th and Main being a very easily accessible outpatient, probably medical-focused outpatient center. So I just want to make sure that that seems really clear. The Main Street campus is our inpatient campus. All of our licensed beds are there. This week we've had a record census, frankly more patients than we've had maybe ever. And this isn't, this is no way a diminishment of that, but it is a signal, it is a realization that in this community as it grows, if we're not a little more decentralized and a little more accessible, we're a little more vulnerable. So that's kind of where we're coming from. I put a note on here that we're working closely with the Pinckney Neighborhood Association on a number of things, and we have a good relationship there. And you know, we have 1,600 employees, and 75% of them are at the main campus and will be after this opens. So I think that's it, unless there's questions from the commissioners, and thank you for your time.
There's one more.
Oh, there is one more.
Yeah,
Okay.
going on with what Russ said, though, I think it's important to know that by moving some of those services, we can allow some expansion of services on campus that we really don't have services for right now. So that's kind of, it's all going to go together, but we're not abandoning anything. So these are just very broad timelines for the project. We hope to close on that land in May. Hopefully it'll be sooner. We don't know. And depending on how we get through the planning commission, and we're going to zip through there, right? We're going to be ready to break ground in hopefully around June, and I think that's what we're trying to get ready for a public groundbreaking. We hope to be done in early 2020. There's a lot of things that could happen between now and then to slow us down, but that's our goal. Are there questions? No. Okay. Thank you for your time.
Actually, I was kind of hoping you could talk to us a little bit about your design build process that you've been doing.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. So Karen and I and Joe Pedley, our Chief Financial Officer, sent out proposals to, I think, 5 or 6 design build. I personally, Mayor, have worked in a design build format before, and I'm kind of a believer in that, if you will. I think it creates a much stronger team environment as opposed to my experience in design, bid, build. There tends to me, for me, a little more finger pointing. And this is very, like all of our design meetings that you've seen up to this point, in that room, your contractors there, your engineers are there, and your architects are all there, all at the same time. So as you're designing real time, the contractor is saying, you know, wait a minute, that mechanical might not quite work with that, or your mechanical engineer is saying, we can't put that on the roof because of this or that. And from my experience, it very much accelerates the process, but it frankly is a much more gratifying process, because you really have, and Karen's really coordinated this. We interviewed 5 firms, had excellent proposals from all of them, did site visits on them, and ended up selecting the one that we thought was the strongest, which also came in the least expensive too. So,
and I think talking about Russ just this last week, I think driving that home to me, I'm a nurse. I've never built a building before, so I'm constantly fascinated by what I'm seeing. But I mean, with an engineer in the room and an architect and a contractor just talking about how to heat and cool and what's energy efficient, you know, you've got an engineer telling you one thing and a contractor also coming into you, so you can kind of balance, you know, what is your lifetime payoff on this? I mean, is it worth it? I mean, and getting everybody's opinions at once, I think it's going to save us a lot of time too, and money. It's been really good so far.
Are you going to try to build this building under the LEED standards?
We are going to be building it to energy standards. Whether we build it to LEED is a decision we're going to make with our team probably in the next 6 months or so. There are pros and cons to that. We are fully looking at all the energy conservation. That's one of the things with the heat and air that we're considering, and really looking at the long-term benefit to the community from energy consumption and also cost. But there are some people that just think that's a marketing issue. We fully intend to use energy saving standards, though.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you all.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I see you have a board member here, too. Do you want to share the board perspective with us, Mike?
We're all for it. Did I say that right? You did.
So can you tell me a little bit about your process to choose the design build, that process?
Well, the staff did most of that, and the board of trustees was involved in the discussions of it and the alternates and what their recommendation was. But we have a lot of trust in what they do, and we rely on the staff to make most of those recommendations. So I know it was very involved and it was detailed, and we think we made the right decision. And I've been in on the meetings with those same folks that Karen just mentioned, and they work hard, and we ask a lot of hard questions and tough questions, and we've had to delay a couple of meetings, cancel them because they weren't ready for the responses that we were expecting. So I liked them all in the same room. That's true. That's pretty nice.
We used a scoring grid that was very objective, and we independently scored, and we had board members. One of our board members is an electrical engineer. She was on our selection committee. Gina, she asked some pretty hard questions. But we scored them independently and anonymously, and then tallied them up, and we were anonymous. And then happily, they were always also the lowest cost. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. I really appreciate hearing that. Okay. Yeah, I was just.
Don't leave. Public comment.
Public comment, yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming back. This is public comment?
This is public comment. Welcome to public comment.
Thank you. My name is KT Walsh, 732 Rhode Island, and I have two light things to say and then a third one. I got to go to Ortho, Kansas when my dog broke my arm, and it's a wonderful place. I want to tell you, the art in the building is only about sports, and there are so many other people who have orthopedic needs in this town. I would love to see some original Kansas or Lawrence art in the building. There's more than Jayhawks that have medical needs. And then about the breast center, I did talk to them when they built it about the horrible stereotypical pinks and mauves that we have to sit in and be surrounded by at the old breast centers, and they did a really nice job of pale greens out at the new one, and I would just ask that you not pull that interior design awfulness. So those are light but sincere. And I also wanted to congratulate Russ Johnson and the board and staff on their planning for the future. I understand it's a business and must branch out to meet our community's needs and hold off outside competition from Topeka and Kansas City. I just want to remind you that last year, a comprehensive study by our own health department found that those of us who live on the east side of Lawrence die 8 years earlier than west side residents. The obvious cause is poverty. They're doing a new study to pinpoint all the aspects of poverty that are causing these health issues now. So I would ask you to engage the LMH Equity Committee and any community partners who work with people who are low income to also steer dollars to the east side of town, perhaps with outreach programs at the East Lawrence Rec Center, at the fairgrounds, at the industrial park. You know, there's places where people gather too on the east side of town. The East Side Neighborhood Associations would welcome your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, KT. Other public comment? Okay, well, thank you very much. Our next item is emergency operations training. Chief?
Good evening. As one of the requirements that we have as a municipal government for federal grants and for other types of even elected official requirements, this evening we're going to review the purpose of emergency management and probably touch a little bit on what your responsibilities are as elected officials, and also for department heads that are here, members of staff, what our responsibilities are. The city is a little unique in comparison to other communities across the state, in that all of the communities inside Douglas County have jointly participated in resolution or ordinance in creating an emergency management division, a part of the county. And so the county then provides the emergency management operations for each of those municipalities, including Lawrence. So this evening, Terry Smith, who's the Director of Emergency Management, is with us, and she'll lead us through the presentation.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Let's see. They told me where it was. There we go. This is not. You just pick it up for me? Yeah, they don't need all my notes, I don't think. Oops. Okay, we could never get it to that, so. Like Chief Bradford said, the purpose of this course is going to give you a brief overview and an orientation to emergency management and to the incident command system and NIMS, which Chief Bradford will do that part. I'm going to do the emergency management portion. So we're going to basically go over what is emergency management, what are your roles and responsibilities, but also what are my roles and responsibilities as the emergency manager. The authorities, the state statutes that are in place for us, and then the incident command system again. So with that, basically the mission of it is to provide that comprehensive emergency management to address and effectively mitigate against, prepare for, respond to, and recover from. And you will hear me probably say that quite a bit, because that has to do with the 4 phases of emergency management. And so that doesn't necessarily have to be just for all types of major emergencies or disasters, but that's what we tend to focus on many times. But a lot of times it can be pre-planned events, it can be a smaller event that impacts just a smaller area, but it's maybe an emergency or a disaster to that particular part of it. But on top of that, we need to educate and train not only the citizens, but that's what we're doing here tonight with all of you as executives and elected officials. Many times you'll hear us talk about all the training and exercises we do for the first responders, but it's just as important for you as elected officials and executives to be a part of that too. So how do we do that? Well, we do it through an integrated emergency management system that's based on the National Incident Management System. You'll hear NIMS, I'm sure you've heard a lot about that, and then we'll talk a lot more about it at the end of it and what your requirements are on that. But it's also on a risk-based hazard analysis and planning. So when we talk about that, we're talking about mitigation many times. So with the hazard mitigation, and the City of Lawrence has been really good to be a participant in that, and we're getting ready, we'll have to again next year go over that again. Every 5 years we need to relook at and either totally redo it or we need to update it. The last time we did it, it was done with, it was called Region K. So if you ever hear of Region K mitigation plan, it was multi-jurisdictions that did it. So with, was a lot of the Northeast counties, but then they specifically made it for Douglas County. We pulled our sections out of it. But what we do is we look at our hazards and we identify, well, what are the main things that we anticipate could happen here locally in our jurisdiction. So I've listed a few of those things that we look at that we tend to have more of, but then we assess those vulnerabilities so that we're able to reduce the risks. So the major responsibilities that have been placed on me are to coordinate the activities from the onset until the response ends. But that really is before the onset because it occurs every day as we're doing our planning and our training and those sort of activities. But during the event, I'm either the liaison among many governmental agencies, I'm coordinating that. I'm not making decisions, I'm not telling anybody what to do, but I'm coordinating those activities that are ongoing in that Emergency Operations Center. It's my responsibility to do a local declaration of emergency. The county commission, and we'll get into that in just a few slides, they're the ones that will sign off on it, but many times it can be pulling everybody together, getting all those dollar figures. Dollar figures for us to even, I can do a declaration anytime that I anticipate. So we've even done them pre-planned events. You guys will be asked sometimes like Final Four, hey, let's go ahead and declare because we hope that we're not going to have anything, but in case we do, everything's in place so then we can get additional resources if needed. So that's where we go for that. And then goal setting. So when we're in that Emergency Operations Center, we're setting those priorities. Beginning here, what do we want it to look like at the end? What is our end goal with any type of emergency or disaster? But your responsibilities as elected officials and executives, and I'm sure Chief will talk about that too, is you guys are really policy. You're not operational. That's what you've hired all those other people to do their job. So with that, before, though, we want you to review, approve those disaster-relevant policies and plans. And when we talk about policies and plans, we're looking beyond just the emergency operations plans. Like I said, the mitigation plan, recovery plan. You guys were really big in the debris management plan. Some of these are mandates for us, but some of them, they're just really important to have in place prior to anything so that you've thought out all those worst case scenarios or worst case events, what could happen so that we're better prepared. Like Richard mentioned earlier, participate in emergency management activities. Many times we have disaster drills, we have exercises. Come in, stop in, review them. Find out what your agencies are doing and how well they're doing on those sort of things. And then be aware of and support those decisions made for the safety, protection, and well-being of the citizens during a disaster. So some of the things that you're going to have to be thinking of during disasters is, and we get asked this a lot, and it's identified in a lot of the plans, well, the historical. We have a lot of historical places throughout Douglas County and environmental, and we need to look at the economic impact and the recovery issues related to those types of places that are around here. But a lot of your stuff is going to be what are jurisdictional policies. We can't say that we're going to continue business as usual. We might look at it totally different even after the disasters occurred. If you remember looking at some of the after actions of Joplin, they totally pulled all the community in and they were like, hey, what do we really want it to? So be open-minded, I think, is what I really want to say is during those type of things is to be thinking outside the box in that. But you need to be able to think very quickly. You're going to be asked a lot of questions. Legal will be asked a lot of things, and you need to be ready to respond very quickly. And then one of the things that we'll get into a little bit more even is information driven. It dates myself a lot when I talk about information because it used to be all we did was press releases. We didn't have a lot of media involved. Now we have social media. Things get out there so quickly. How are we going to mitigate that? Could possibly be another disaster within a disaster, is how are we going to control that? And that's on Porter there, so. But citizens are going to expect a lot of you as a community. They're going to want everything to be just the way it was. They're going to want to know that their water is still, good and that they can drink it and that they've got that service and that they're not having it diminished. They're going to want everything to be dealt with. They're going to want fire and medical to come out and still do I'm going to just use, for example, a lift assist or whatever, not thinking that we've got to take care of those critical ones. Everybody still wants everything to go routinely like it has always been. They want to know how it's going to affect them personally. Is it going to raise my taxes? Is it going to create something? Are we going to lose benefits? Are we going to get paid? All those kind of questions, because citizens aren't just all the public, I mean, those are also your employees too. You've got to think about that. Now, when we talk about county government, just some of mine, and I'm not going to really bore you with a lot of our Kansas state statutes, but like Chief said, it is a Kansas state statute that you've established and maintain a disaster agency responsible for emergency management. That is in a joint city-county resolution. I've got it here if you really want to see it, but that's it. That appoints the emergency manager, that also develops what is it that are my functional responsibilities before, during, and after a disaster. And so with that, it also is, those are some of the plans that we have to have. And some of these plans are tied to grant funding. When you talk about mitigation, like we just talked about a minute ago, mitigation grants are tied many times. So if you haven't participated in that grant, then you don't qualify for some of those opportunities. For example, safe rooms. If it's not identified in your plan that you want to, and it's not saying that in your plan you're going to always do safe rooms. It's if funding becomes available, this is something we will consider. So it doesn't tie you to that, but it opens up that door so that if funding does come available. Your local emergency operations plan, I did bring just the basic one. And when we talk about that, it's the roles and responsibilities of all the different agencies that are going to be involved with that. And so we go through that. Though that particular plan has to also be reviewed, revised, updated every 5 years. With that, we don't just sit back and write that plan. We bring in all the key players and make them go through. We just a couple weeks ago, I think it was, Chief, we pulled in ESF4, which is firefighting, brought all the different fire departments together. They read their portion of the plan and identified, did it work? Was it what they wanted in that plan? So it's very important. And then again, it's my responsibility to declare the state of local disaster when that criteria is met. One of the criteria, we can always say that we want a disaster, but to qualify for a disaster is a little bit more. For our jurisdiction, we have to have over 407,000 in uninsured losses to get any type of a reimbursement. So if it's something, many times governmental entities, school districts, those sort of things, if they're impacted quite significantly, there's more uninsured losses typically because they're self-insured. Whereas if you are a homeowner and the majority of the area that's been damaged is homes, most of those people have insurance, and so you don't meet your threshold very easily. And again, establish your emergency management program that includes the 4 phases. So we'll go into, just briefly a little bit, mitigation, talking about those things that will lessen the cost. So what are some things that we can do? Well, we've done some things. If you think about the Kansas River, remember a few years ago they went in and they did a lot of mitigation efforts so that we wouldn't have flooding. It's very costly, but in the long run, it's a real benefit. We can just talk little things. City of Eudora, for example, does tree trimming so that it lessens the impact on the power lines during ice storms and that sort of thing. So they don't have to be real costly. And there are a lot of things that people do just every day that we don't even think about. Preparedness, again, that's your planning, training, exercises that you tend to see probably more of or more talked about, because that's kind of the fun thing. So with that, we can go out and we can do even just fairs and different things to really let people. So preparedness for the fire department could be going out in schools and teaching them, hey, here's a smoke alarm, this is what you need to do. For us, it could be tornado drills. So they can be really simple, or they can be, again, a very costly exercise like Richard talked about, that we'll be doing a couple this summer of those full-scale ones. Then you get into the disaster. We all know what that means. It's happened, so we get in then to the response mode. From there, we go into recovery. And recovery can be very, very long. I think it took us 10, 12 years after the 93 floods to finally close out all of that. So for many of you, you go back to your normal and it all is the same thing, but for us, still in emergency management and maybe some of the response agencies, it goes on a little bit longer. But one thing that's important is during mitigation, it's been proven that for every dollar you spend, saves you $4 in the end. So that's pretty significant. Again, for county government, the commission chair for the county is equal to that of the Board of County Commissioners. So when I go before them for a local declaration or something like that, the board chair can actually sign off on those, especially if there's not a meeting or if one of them's out of town, they can do that. And then that activates that local emergency operations plan. The operations plan, though, does have precedence over local ordinances during a declared disaster. This is really an important thing. It can allow for prearranged contracts between local units of government. And we actually have one in the state of Kansas that all of the cities in the county have signed off on this mutual aid agreement. And what it states is, during a time of disaster, if it's not here and we're not impacted and we have resources, we have that capability that we can already send that, and we can do that. You'll see it a lot during fire season. We will go, hey, there's a big, for example, last year in Reno County, there was that large fire that was going on and they were looking at losing their whole town. We sent multiple different jurisdictions throughout Douglas County to assist with that. We've done that with that. We've done that with Katrina. That went beyond even the state of Kansas, but we do have that mutual aid agreement. A lot of your departments, though, have mutual aid agreements, either with other ones, the city and county, public works. You've got the fire department who has them with, is it Overland Park, your mutual aid agreements? So some of those, so that you already have them in line and you're not then trying to, it's much easier on the reimbursement end if it does become a declared disaster, if you have these pre-mutual aid agreements. The other thing is that you adopt the National Incident Management System. Good thing, we've already done that. All the cities and counties signed off that. I think it was in 2006 that we were going to follow the National Incident Management System, comply with the NIMS requirements. They were a lot more stringent back in 2006 too. We used to have to do an annual reporting on where everybody was and who had it, who didn't have it. We hold that more to individual agencies and departments now. It's not a requirement of our grant to submit that paperwork anymore, but it is a requirement for everybody to have different levels of incident command, of the incident command system training. And then the bottom one requires that responders and elected officials complete those classes. So if you need to know which ones you need to take, let Chief or I know and we can guide you on that. Some of you have already taken it. Most of them are online for you, so it's not difficult, just a little bit of time involved on that. So during a disaster, again, you will have overarching responsibility for the safety and security of the jurisdiction. You will need to do a lot of leadership and decision making. It's amazing the amount that goes on in just even a small one, but a larger one, there's a lot more that is in there. I don't want to talk too much about this because it gets kind of in the weeds and stuff, but the disaster declaration is you start at the local level. Every disaster begins and ends at the local level. So at the local level, we would declare here, that would go up to the state. If the state determined that they felt it was a big enough disaster, then they would go to the governor and ask him to declare. And then if the governor decides it's even large enough, he can ask then the president to declare for a presidential declaration. So at a local declaration, you implement the local emergency operations plan, which is your first step in getting those resources. So you want to declare, you have to exhaust all of your resources here locally, and then you can ask for additional. So if we needed, for example, the Aberdeen apartment, when it was hit by the tornado is a good example, we needed more law enforcement. And so the only way we could get that was through the National Guard. Well, the only way you can get the National Guard is through emergency management. So we brought them in just to do scene perimeter security, to keep people out that didn't belong in there. That was their job. It activates your mutual aid agreements. It does protect the jurisdiction from legal liability and provides you some access to the possibility of state and federal assistance. But always remember, there's no guarantee that you're ever going to get any money. So go into it doing what you know is right, no matter what the cost may be. That's what, and then if you get reimbursed, that's an added bonus. But you never know if you're going to get any assistance. The flooding last year was a typical example. We really thought we had it. Our threshold was met, but as an overall, they didn't think it was big enough to take because of all the other disasters that had gone on. They didn't think it was big enough to take to the president and have him declare it. So, state declaration gives the power to the governor, like I just said, and then to rescind orders and regulations. But remember, it doesn't provide any funds for the local governments or people, only resources. And then the federal, many times, what that comes down to is a $75-25 cost share. And that's how we've done it with public assistance before. But again, it's based on the eligibility, public works, doing project worksheets. You have to have a lot of documentation though. And when I say lots, you have to have lots. You have to prove that this vehicle had this person in it and that they both matched up. And so you have to have a lot of that stuff done ahead of time, which our agencies have done a really good job. But you need to make sure, because they will scrutinize every single thing. They'll look at how much you bought. Was that roadway already damaged prior to it? And you just want to have it fixed now? Are you wanting upgrades? All those kind of things get played into it when FEMA comes out. So I can't stress enough, all disasters are local events. They begin and end in your community and under your authority. A little bit about the Emergency Operations Plan though. ESF stands for Emergency Support Functions. So if you look at these, we have 15 of them. Many of them are city is the main agency that's responsible for that. So transportation, public works and engineering is combined between the county and the city. You've got search and rescue, hazmat, that's city. So many of these, some of them are shared. When you talk about communications, that's the 911, so that's shared. Emergency management, we really consider that shared in many ways because we have that resolution signed that says we're going to do it for you. So those are the different ones. And when we go through all of those, we make sure that everybody understands what their roles and responsibilities are before, during, and after a disaster. So that when the actual event happens, everybody already knows what they need to do. So your role is to provide for the health, safety, and welfare of your community. So maintain that public confidence, manage your expectations, and participate in the EOC's response and recovery efforts. Remember that y'all can't come down to the EOC, but many times we've always had a representative who's come down, just checked out, made sure that everything's okay, reassuring those people. Sometimes we have to separate you out and put you in a policy room because that has to be separated from the people that are making decisions for their people that are out in operations. So we're not doing it to just put you in a room all by yourself, but for that purpose. This again is during when your Emergency Operations Center, and you guys, are you all familiar with the Emergency Operations Center? Okay. Emergency Operations Center is really just a physical location. So it could be anywhere, but the one that's designated right now is at 11th in the Judicial and Law Enforcement Building on the 2nd floor. You walk, you have to have secure, so we need to get badges and let people in. And I think Chief's going to talk about a little bit about credentialing, aren't you? Here in a little bit. But when you come in there, we're looking at, my job is to make sure, okay, coordinate, be the liaison, activate the EOC. Doesn't mean I necessarily am the one that makes the decision to activate the EOC. Many times it could be Chief because he's out on scene, he knows what's going on, he knows that there's this large, because his people are the first on scene many times and he knows. So he can call me up and say, we need to activate the EOC. Sometimes we activate it for Final Four, pre-planned events, ice storms that are being projected. We can go, hey, let's be proactive. If we know it's within 12 hours and it's still looking like it, well, let's go ahead and activate the EOC and get those key people in there so that when it actually happens, everybody's ready to go. That's just a picture of what the EOC can look like. That is not our EOC. We do have tables, we have phones, we have computers. Our job is to really support the emergency responders. That is the role of the Emergency Operations Center, to coordinate damage assessment, recovery operations, resources, make sure that they have what they need out in the field to do their job. Some other people, besides those ESFs that I mentioned, and many times not every ESF is going to be in your Emergency Operations Center. It might just be, for example, we're getting ready for fire season. The biggest people that we're going to have in there is going to be fire. So it'll be fire and emergency management the majority of the time. We might have to call in public works because if it gets that big and we need them. But sometimes it's very small who can be in there. If it's a public health emergency, well, you maybe only need public health and emergency management, something like that. You maybe don't need every ESF. So you really can hand select who needs to be involved in that. But also you can add in, we might need private nonprofit in there. It might be your utility company. We really need them to come in because we don't know the impact, and it's better to get them right in there with us on that. And then it's yours.
Any questions for Jerry?
Got a few.
Go for it.
On the slide about key concepts, you talked about community leaders thinking creatively and quickly, and you mentioned Joplin in the process. Can you explain a little bit more about that? What happened in Joplin with the redevelopment? I think that's what you were talking about.
I was talking about that. They pulled the whole community together and did a lot of workshops to find out what the community wanted their community to look like, because they lost everything. So did they want more than one hospital? Did they want it to be green? So some of those things that maybe, for example, I could say to you, downtown Lawrence, for example, is that, if that was taken out, how would we want that rebuilt? Well, I don't know that I couldn't make that decision. So with like Joplin did, they brought everybody together to build that consensus so that people felt it was their community. They were a part of it.
Okay. When you talked about KSA 48929, you talked about an emergency operations plan which is approved by Kansas Emergency Management. How often is that plan approved?
Every 5 years.
Every 5
we
years.
review it every year. And not just internally, but that's where the plan is reviewed with each of the ESFs.
Right.
But then if the Kansas state would change their response plan, then we would have to. And they're getting ready to give us all new
Okay. So when is our
criteria.
next plan up for approval?
Next year.
Next year. Okay. On KSA 48935, you talk about establishes the local emergency operations plan as having precedence over local ordinances during a declared disaster. What's the duration of that precedence?
However long you have your disaster declaration in place.
Okay,
So we
So-
start with 7 days.
okay.
And then but it can be reevaluated. For example, when we go into burn bans, if we have to do those anymore, we do them for 7 days, but if we make the determination that we all of a sudden get lots and lots of rain, we can pull it out
Okay.
and say we don't need it anymore.
So what establishes when that disaster is essentially not called off? I mean, it could be that you get a lot of rain. Because, I mean, something like Joplin, that was a disaster for a long time. How long would that be, for example?
Well, I think you have to look at your resources and how much more you need on an incident like that. So if you continue to need additional resources beyond your local capacity, That's, your disaster's still ongoing.
Okay, so that declared disaster goes and continues.
Because you have to have your disaster declared to get your additional resources.
Okay. And on the slide, it says during a disaster, commissioners will, was that specifically for county commissioners, or is that city commissioners as well? It says we'll have overarching responsibility for the safety and security of a jurisdiction.
Well, that's going to be for any commissioner is
Okay.
going to have that.
Okay. Right. I think that's what I've got. Any other questions?
Yeah, mine's more of a comment. I'm glad that we were having this tonight, because when I was mayor last year, we actually had that earthquake.
Yes.
And so it was just like, should I do something? I don't know what to do. And I called Mike Amix, and then I think I called Tom Marcus. And the answer was, no, you don't need to do anything. But knowing where I'm supposed to call to see if I'm somehow activated in some way, it would be really helpful for something like that.
And we've got a call notification system, and it's in place, and we work very closely with City Hall to keep everybody who's from commissioners down to your department heads, all in there. And so, like, Mr. Marcus, he would be calling you if he
Okay.
needed you there.
Okay, so it's nothing that I have to seek out. Someone will get hold of me.
Unless you know that he's really, really busy, you could reach out. I tell people all the time, if it's in the middle of something that I think is a disaster, you're better off to call me directly than to wait for me to call, because I'm going to have so much going on my plate that sometimes we need somebody to go, hey, do you need us to do anything?
Yeah.
Whether it be a text, you know, or an email or whatever, sometimes that helps out too.
Yeah, because I kind of wonder, I mean, should I tweet something that says everything is fine in the city? You know, I mean, that's what I was wondering too, just to like settle people down, because of course no one knew if there had been damage anywhere. You don't want everyone driving around looking for it too.
Before you would tweet something or do something of that sort, I think it would be beneficial to talk to your communications department to say, hey, what are we putting out? Have you put anything out? So that we all have that consistent message going out. Because if they heard from you that it was okay, but
Yeah.
Chief Bradford goes, no, we
No,
just
it's not
lost,
okay."
you know, something, you know,
Right.
south of Lawrence or whatever.
Right, right, okay. That's really helpful. I had one other question too, that we had that windstorm in North Lawrence not too long ago, and that's when I was mayor too. And to me, my first instinct is, you know what, I'm going to stay out of the way. You know, we have emergency people over there taking care of the trees that fell or whatever flooding might be happening. You know, that was my first instinct, was stay out of the way. And it's funny because, you know, I talked to another commissioner and their instinct is to go over there. And so what do you think are we able to say ahead of time what would be an appropriate reaction?
I think it's difficult, but the hardest thing is when everybody decides they're going to go into an area that's been impacted.
Right.
It makes it harder for those response agencies to get to those that need their assistance. That was pretty apparent during the Aberdeen tornado. We, as responders, couldn't even get to the scene in a time because everybody decided, I've never seen something like that. I want to be out there. I want to help. And the people that even lived there couldn't get in. And so I think it's best for everybody, if you're okay and it's not your area, to stay away and let those response agencies get in there and to be able to assess it and to know that everything is okay and then to open up roads. The ones in North Lawrence, I mean, it was difficult for us to get in to even do damage assessment because everybody, you know, we hadn't had something like that in a while, so people were like, well, I want to see what's going on. And with social media now, everybody was seeing pictures and doing that. So it's best if we can just stay home and let those agencies take care of it.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
So if you need us, you'll call us, right?
You know, just think about the situation. You have your emergency crew. I mean, our people are even on a daily basis, they're responding to emergencies all the time. And the last thing they need to do is have essentially somebody coming in asking what they should be doing when the emergency personnel are focused on dealing with the emergency. And yes, you would be contacted, you'd be involved, If we set up an incident command, there's actually a position that's created for a public information officer. And so all of that public information is typically funneled right through the PIO. You talk about disasters occurring and then rehabilitation. Having come from Iowa City, they had a major flood that happened in 2008. If you go to Iowa City today, they're just now replacing and building a new bridge that served as a dam on the Iowa River. They're raising a road, I think, somewhere in the vicinity of 10 feet. That's under construction right now. So what year is this? 2018? 10 years later. The amount of damage and coincidental type of improvements that were made in that city alone is approaching, with the university damage that occurred, is approaching $1 billion. So one of the things that we really wanted you to understand is your role in all of this. But there's some training, and I think Mark's going to get into that and discuss what your responsibilities are for training. Because what I was seeing is that, quite frankly, some of us do not have the certifications that we're required to have for eventually, looking for a declaration funding later on. Those questions will get asked then. And it would be very embarrassing, I think, for the city not to have stayed up to, where we need to be on those things. So with that, I ask that maybe Mark jump in and
Thank you.
talk about some of the training.
We have another question here.
Question. You had indicated earlier about a certain dollar amount that needed to occur, a loss, in order for it to be declared a disaster. Could you expound on that? And
I can.
give
It
me an
has to be
idea
an
how
uninsured,
that's
it has to be an
calculated?
uninsured losses, and the state comes up with the figure. And so it's on the per capita, and I have my piece of paper. So with Douglas County, we have to have $407,839.68. So, and that's based off of the 2010 population. So in 2010, the population was 110,826. And so what they do is they say the county per capita cost indicator is 368. So you take 110,826 times 368 and you get the 407. And then the state has their per capita. So that's how it's done. Did that answer your
Yep.
question?
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my part will be relatively brief. I'm going to talk about two things. One, NIMS and what NIMS is. And the second, I'll briefly talk about how we manage incidents, really of all types. So to start with, NIMS is a nationwide template. If you recall, most, if not all of these requirements came post 9/11. It was a directive from the federal government that we found out not only in the World Trade Center issues, but other events around the country. We as first responders weren't really speaking well with one another. We had different radio frequencies, we had different terminology, we had different uniforms, we had different markings for highways, we had all kinds of different things. So it created a mechanism by which we have interoperability radios so we can communicate on a portable today. I can talk to a fire chief across the state of Kansas type of setup. So regardless of where we go, and that's also outside of the state, the way the systems are set up is that we can communicate that way. Who? It's everybody from the federal government all the way down to, in some cases, private entities, and those are contract entities. So as an example, recently the hotel fire, we had communications directly with a federal agency as part of that investigation, and we were able to communicate directly with them, obviously on telephone, but also radio communications as well. And then how is the NIMS system really implemented? It's courses like this. It's also online courses, and we will provide you with that link that you'll need to go to. It's about a 30-minute per course, and there's 3 of them that you need to take. There's a little quiz at the end. You won't fail, promise. Well, most of you won't, but we'll do some remediation. And then why, again, the number one goal is that we are going to reduce loss of life, property, and the environment. So the main NIMS component that I want to talk about, if you look through this, and Terry mentioned preparedness, communications, and information management, which is something we're working on within the city, and that's because of the cyber problems across the country. Resource management, we're always here asking for additional people, so when there's disasters, we need lots of people. And Terry mentioned sometimes we can't support our own needs, so we have to call outside our jurisdiction to get assistance. And there's really two ways of doing that. She mentioned the mutual aid efforts. In the state of Kansas in 2012, they did create the law that she talked about, and that's for intra-state mutual aid. Prior to that, you had to have a written mutual aid agreement between the party in which you were going to provide service for and vice versa. Obviously, that created a lot of administrative time, a lot of dollars and cents to make that happen. So now the law is you have to opt out if you don't want to provide mutual aid to anybody else within the state of Kansas. And then there's also, for the periphery counties, we also have interstate mutual aid, which allows us to go, as an example for us, into Missouri for the most part. Boundary states going to Oklahoma, have Oklahoma come here. Terry mentioned the wildland fires. For state governments, which happen to be the state forestry, they're not in that particular state law, they're exempt. So the state forestry in Oklahoma would not come into the state of Kansas. When actually the fire started in Oklahoma and spread to Kansas, they wouldn't come across the state line. So it's to eliminate those types of things. So then command and management, that's what I'm going to talk about here in a minute, and then ongoing management and maintenance of systems. So what is NIMS and what it's not? NIMS is a flexible system. It's a doctrine. It's required by federal law. It has various concepts, principles, and terminologies, as I talked about earlier, and it's an organizational process by whoever is involved in that particular incident can communicate, can be efficient in its operations, and again, most of all, prevent loss of life. And it is applicable to all types of hazards. So we've talked about wildland fires, we've talked about severe weather, there's also active shooting, there's large-scale events, whether it's parades. We've seen here lately a number of larger cities with different types of events where they've had a single car drive through the event and kill numerous people. So it's all levels of types of events, up to and including what we might see in New York City with the 911 event. So NIMS is not an incident management plan, it's a system. It is not a resource allocation plan. It does not tell you how many people you need per incident. It is not a terrorism or weapons of mass destruction specific plan. Those are plans that we create and work on separately. And it is not designated to address international events. It's only local. So what's incident command? So this is a process by which we use to manage incidents every day. In Lawrence, if we have a one-unit response, so one ambulance goes out any place, they're using the incident command system. And they would report on scene and give a size up of what they have and acknowledge whether or not they need any additional resources for that particular incident. If it's a fire incident, then whoever that first arriving officer is, normally it's a captain on a fire truck, would do a size up of the incident, reporting what they have on whatever sides they can see, how many stories it is, what the building's built with, if there's fire protection systems in place, and again, whether or not they need additional resources. Then as chief officers get there, if in fact they're needed, then they do a similar type of review, and then every 20 minutes we do a review. We actually call it a CAN report, but it's a condition type of report every 20 minutes. Depending on the type of event, then one person can't manage that event. So if it gets larger than what a captain can manage by themselves, and routinely we think of a span of control of being one supervisor to 5 subordinates. We do the same in the fire service where we have one commander for 5 units of people. Anytime you get over that, then you need to break off in branches or divisions. And then we break those off even further in large incidents based on two factors. One, task, and the other is geography. So a task might be a ventilation type division. So if we have heavy smoke in a building someplace, then you're going to assign X number of firefighters in a ventilation division. Or a geographic area on a wildland, then you may have a square mile labeled as the alpha division related to a square mile of land. So you would have officers in charge of that. Each one of those people then would be designated, and they would report back to whoever the incident commander is. So the difference between the incident commander and the EOC is that the EOC, and I'll speak about a couple things that maybe Terry didn't hit on, which I think are important for elected officials, but the EOC is where they manage the overall support to the incident or incidents. So you could have an emergency operations center in the law enforcement center that would manage, say, a tornado that may have hit 3 different places in town. Or you have a tornado and a large structure fire, or you have a tornado and a large structure fire and lots of flooding, so you have lots of people in distress. So it's to handle a major incident or multiple other smaller incidents that then task the resources that you have in your jurisdiction. Whoops. Well, I'll go into this one. So how long does it last? And that was one of the questions. Part of that is you determine that as the elected body, how long you want the declaration to be in place. And that can vary for different parts of the declaration. How long do we need to be self-sufficient? That again is something that you all will work with staff to determine how long we actually need additional resources and ultimately who's going to pay for that. That's why we have a good reserve balance. So if we're paying out millions in our type of mitigation and response, then that's where that money's going to come from. And then how do we know when it's over? Well, the city manager mentioned that one. Some cases it's years, so it's not going to be over. And then if you think of individuals, for sometimes it's never over. If it takes out their business and they weren't insured and they can't get another business started, it's going to last a long time. So I mentioned that the incident command system is a standardized on-scene system of all hazards, and it's adopted by this integrated organizational structure, and we talked about MEMS. It could be a single or multiple incidents within any certain geographical boundary. Why do we do it? The number one reason why I stress that we need it in your fire department is for safety of the firefighters and safety of others. We have got to have control. We have got to know where people are at every single moment, or we're going to have some type of life safety issue. Then we either look at strategic or tactical operations. So strategic operations are what the incident commanders are going to be developing, and then they assign those tactical objectives to the companies that are working at that particular incident. And then we need efficient use of resources. You know, I'll stress here again that we need to think in any department, but for public safety, you know, efficient use of resources, we max that out every day. There is not a day of the week that we're down to 1 ambulance in Douglas County. So when you think about all the ambulances being busy, then the firefighting force in this town are the men and women on the fire trucks. So you're looking at 16 people to do firefighting in the community. So we maximize efficiency of resources every day, not just during disasters. The legal basis, Terry mentioned this, but the management of domestic incidents, which is the HSPD 5 and then PDD 8 is the national preparedness documents. Those are mandated by the federal government and then passed down through Kansas Department of Emergency Management and then to the county level. So what do you need to do? Again, adopt ICS, which you've done through the resolution. You need to direct incident managers, meaning fire and law enforcement managers, to be responsive in their organizations to train and exercise. Remember that come budget time. We need to integrate an ECS or ICS system into our functional system, which again is part of that, and we are doing it. Conduct training, which Terry mentioned, and we use a number of exercises all over the county. and then conduct coordinating ICS-oriented exercises that involve responders even outside of our jurisdiction. So examples, I've mentioned the fire, both structural and wildland, mentioned the natural, human and animal disease outbreaks. We do plan for that, and we have a group of veterinary physicians that are instrumental in taking care of that for us. The search and rescue mission is part of your fire medical department. Hazardous materials. Whether you know it or not, we provide hazardous materials on a level A, which is the highest level for the entire county. That's an agreement as part of the emergency management plan that you've adopted. The county participates in that at $60,000 a year, and the city provides the rest. Criminal acts and crime scene investigations, again, you can imagine what those would be. Terroristic acts, weapons of mass destruction, and national special security events such as presidential visits and Super Bowl. And believe it or not, the president does come to Lawrence, Kansas. So it takes quite a little bit to take care of that individual. And then other planned events, I think you talked about some of those last week, but it would be those types of events. So what are the benefits? We can manage everything, again, from a single unit response to a major incident. And I think that we can do that very, very well in this community. It allows personnel from a variety of agencies, and we have some great partners that we work with, both in the county, the state, and the federal government. It provides a logical administrative support system, so we can branch that out as we need, and it's very cost effective by duplicating efforts. We just simply can't afford to do that. So I think I'm going to go to the authority piece. So chain of command or unity of command. Chain of command is a line of authority within the ranks of the incident command system. I'm the chief, but I may not be in charge of an incident. Matter of fact, very seldom am I in charge of an incident. But having the most bugles on my collar means that I'm the guy in charge. But as an incident commander, you're the person in charge of that particular incident. Then unity of command means that every individual is designated as a supervisory position as they need them. And I'll talk about adding these branches. There's 4 major functions outside of the incident commander that on a large scale incident you can implement as needed. I remember that by calling it FLOP. Not that our incidents flop, but F is for finance. So if it's a large scale incident, we need somebody to manage all the finances. We're going to be spending lots of money. We need to track resources. We need to track people on those resources. We would probably get somebody from finance to do that. L is for logistics. So anything that we need to purchase or use for that particular incident, we need somebody to go get it. So if you can remember, I don't want to do age in here, but Radar O'Reilly in MASH, he was a great logistics officer. He got it before you really wanted it, and that's the type of person you want in there. Then there's operations, and operations is just that. They take care of whatever's going on at that particular incident. And then there's planning. Every time we're doing something, and we call them operational periods, but every time we're doing something, we're planning if it's going good or if it's going bad. We had 3 operational periods during the hotel fire, and they went from not so bad to really bad to all over. But during those periods, we had people that were planning what was going to take place, and then we ultimately did a controlled burn because of what we found out. So elected officials and executive roles. So to answer the previous questions is, we will call you, don't call me. You will be notified, and you'll be notified where we'd like you to go, and we'll even help you on what to do when you get there. So kind of like do as I ask, and everything will go fine. Your job, again, I think, is to take care of all of the policy issues of the city. Not the operational issues, but the policy issues of the city. You talked about if we do a declaration, then it supersedes ordinances. Then a lot of the questions will be, since those perhaps will be somewhat removed, how do you want the city to operate? Business hours, collection of bills, paying bills, all those types of things. And then oversee resource coordination. If we're going to pull in $1 million earth mover to start moving debris, and it's going to cost us $50,000 a day, that's something that you'll probably want to approve. Versus if we need lumber and we're going out to the lumber yard to shore up buildings, we're just going to go get it and put it on our card type of thing. So that's the scope that we're talking about. I can tell you as the incident commander for Greensburg on week 2, it was just, we were still looking for people in the second week. So the span of these incidents can be quite dramatic. And then what's the difference between command and coordination? Command is the act of directing or ordering or controlling explicit statutory, regulatory, or delegate authority. That is to make sure that one, our incident commanders are doing things that are by the law. We don't want any type of civil types of problems. Who has the explicit authority to do that? You've given that to me, and then in turn I've given it to various people within the fire medical department, the same as Chief Burns has done in the police department. Multi-agency coordination, to me probably the most important, and I think we do it extremely well here. And I think we do it well here because of the activities that we've had with the university, specifically athletics. You know, having the Final Four here is a great celebration. It's great for the community, it's great for income, those types of things, and we've had very, very good celebrations. But one thing that it's done is it's allowed us to prepare, to plan, and to coordinate multiple agencies all at one time, and to see when you have 350 police officers in town and you have 175 firefighters in town providing those services, the coordination works very well in this community. So I think you should be proud of that. Elected officials, you obviously delegate authority to the incident commander legally, and the incident commander then directs the tactical and operational responsibilities during that incident management. So incident roles, again, we manage the incident. We keep the EOC informed about what's going on, important matters. And the elected official or executive's roles then are policy, mission, strategic direction, and then giving people authority to do their job. Oh, and I don't like management by objectives. We do it by management by Bradford. Overall priorities. And I can't emphasize this enough, the basic firefighter gets this, I think, day one in recruit school, but it's life safety, incident stabilization, and then property and environmental conservation. That's the kind of steps that we use in all of our thought processes, and it's done very well over the fire service history. So coordination and incident management. We talked briefly, or there was a question about public information officer. The city has a designated public information officer for the city. He or she may not be the designated PIO for an incident. Currently, on small incidents, we have a police department that has a public information officer, and in the fire department, it's whoever I can scrounge up to release something. And in our incident the other day, even the hotel was not a big incident by any means. We used city resources where Porter came in and assisted the fire marshal in preparing that release or those releases for that incident. So we can make it work. It just doesn't work extremely well yet on the fire side because of staffing issues. Joint information is where you would bring in different entities that are involved. So if we had a tornado in Douglas County that came from the county into the city, perhaps clipped the university, or maybe hit Haskell, then it would be somebody from the city, from the county, from the university, one or the other. It could be, if it's a large scale strike on a building, it could be somebody from a particular building that has knowledge about processes within that building. They would all get together, create the information, and then elect, if you will, somebody that will be designated as the public information officer for that incident. Sometimes they'll want the chief, sometimes they'll want the police chief, depending on the incident. Sometimes they want the mayor to see what the mayor has to say. So that's where you see the CNNs and all the others where you have the barrage of people behind the microphone and they keep taking turns. That is a joint information type system where people will come in and talk about their specific piece of the puzzle to get that information out. We have a standing joint information group here in Douglas County. I think they meet quarterly to talk about those types of things and to stay trained, and they'll go back to the National Training Center for continual training. Elected officials, again, must coordinate and integrate messages. So there's probably something that you want to get across. Everybody wants to hear what the elected officials say. Let's see, what is that? The people want to know what you have to say until you get elected, and then they want you to know what they have to say. It's kind of like that. But you want to coordinate those messages back out to the public that, yes, you're in good hands and everything's going well. And that, again, is what the Joint Information System is supposed to do, is support you and provide you that information so you know what's going on. Then after action, after every one of our small events, let's say it's a cardiac arrest patient, we do an after-action review of how well, or perhaps ways that we could improve in patient care. We do all that all the way up to a major incident. And again, we set out what we did to do. We look at what actually happened, what we could have done differently, what equipment maybe didn't work right, what policies didn't work right, lessons learned, and then follow up. So if it's a large-scale incident, communities do that, and they do it again and again and again, and hopefully the idea is they become better prepared each time an event happens. And then NIMS preparedness. The only thing I'm going to say is that we'll provide you that list. I would highly recommend, so we meet our federal grant requirements and disaster requirements, that you participate in that. Again, it doesn't take very long, and we'll get you those three courses. And that's all I have. Questions for me or for Director Smith?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Well, I think we've done our meeting today. Thank you very much. Oh, okay. Public comment. Thank you. Thanks for reminding me, Sharon.
Thank you. KT Walsh, 732 Rhode Island. I appreciate your question, Commissioner Soden, about should commissioners, the mayor, show up. And I guess everybody should just wait and see. But I will tell you, 40 years ago when East Lawrence was flooding, that was back before the city put money into stormwater on the east side. Commissioner Nancy Shantz came down in her hip boots to our flooding houses, and it meant so much to us that a commissioner would show up. I'm just saying. The question I have for these two wonderful people whose work I hope we never need again is, when we had the microburst in East Lawrence, all the cell phones went out. And I understand that they're better now, but I want to know what happens if the towers go down, if the internet isn't working. I know ham radios even came into play in Puerto Rico. So what kind of backups do we have about that? Thank you.
I still discourage you from going to the scene. As far as cellular coverage, we actually have a different system that emergency management people or emergency responders work on. So you may not be able to access the cell phones and Wi-Fi, but we can.
I think to elaborate a little bit on that too is we do have a really good amateur radio network here in Douglas County. Through Douglas County Emergency Management, there's the auxiliary communication team, which they meet and they practice every Monday night their policies and their protocol, and so they're always on top of that. They're a very self-sufficient group. And then the Douglas County also has another group that's not a part of our particular volunteer group. So that is in place. We have found out, I mean, we have communications on wheels so that we have some of those assets that can come into place. So with some of our large-scale events, we've even brought those in beforehand, knowing that we're going to inundate the system. You'll see those a lot of times up at even the football games and that sort of event. So we have thought of that too. Sure.
That did remind me of a question I had, though, is
Yeah.
how, if the cell phones are down and you need us, how do you get hold of us then? Should we get to City Hall?
We can always personally go out and get people if we need to. One of the things that we found out, and I'll go back again to the Aberdeen incident, was you were able to text. And so texting is much more reliable during disasters than it is to pick up a phone and try and call somebody. But we'll talk about communication plans too. I mean, if you're going that way, even beyond that, but always have that communication plan in place so that people know that you're taken care of and that you have that pre-planned.
So if we don't have texting either, should I just come to City Hall?
I'm sure somebody will be able to find you. They know where you live. I'm sure Mr. Marcus is thinking that would, I don't know what your plan is for something like that, but do you plan to go get them if you need them instead of everybody coming down to City Hall?
Converging.
We'll find them.
I thought so. They'll find you.
Thank you.
I appreciate the comment, KT, and I think that there may be a role for us to come out at some point and, you know, visit with folks and express our concern for their situation. So, well, yeah, and we don't want to get in the way, but we want to be able to support people if they need it and if we can help. So, you know, all in due course.
I think that what I have seen to be very successful is that, you know, at your regular scheduled meetings, that you make comments, express your concerns, that sort of thing. I did make it over to North Lawrence and different parts of North Lawrence, and I observed one city commissioner actually with a chainsaw in hand helping a former elected official at their place of residence that had lost a few trees and branches and so forth. So, you know, you folks all know people, you know, and so part of what's going to happen is you're going to be contacted by people that you know. We expect that that's going to happen, and I think that you've been pretty respectful in terms of staying out of both harm's way and the emergency workers' way too. So, you know, some of it's inevitable that you're gonna, you know, want to know what's going on and all of that, and we'll do our best to communicate. But when you get into a full-blown disaster, and I'm sure Lawrence has had their, you know, share of those things happen here as well, you know, you'll find that you'll find a place, okay? It will happen. You'll be involved to some level, and you'll fit into that role, whether it's helping with, you know, Red Cross or delivering water or whatever it takes. My experience is that elected officials and appointed officials will find a place for them. There's usually a major volunteer effort that occurs in some of these disasters. I've been involved in them since I was a kid. They let us all out clean farmers' fields from all the tornado debris where I grew up. So, you know, those things are just part of a community, and we'll find a place here in this community if we hit a major disaster as well. So,
thank you.
I wouldn't worry about it, because you'll probably have more than your share to do.
Well, actually, I was at the Visitor Center that evening. There was a celebration festival that went on with, it's a Diwali celebration, Festival of Light, and we were using candles. And so I got to go out and admire the work that was going on, but I definitely did not want to get in the way. So thanks for all the work you guys do. Appreciate it. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I think that's it for tonight. Thank you very much.